Hi everyone. Today's session that we'll be doing is managing employment relations and employment law, and my name is Shazia Khan. The learning outcome we'll be doing today is learning outcome 4, which is to analyse organisational level employment relation processes, functions and procedures. So before I go into a learning outcome 4, I'll just give you a brief outline of what we did in learning outcome 3, so you've got an idea of what we did in the last session. So in learning outcome 3, we looked at understanding aspects of employment protection given to different types of workforces. We looked at what employment protection legislation is and why it's so important in regards to things like employment protection, court rulings, and also looked at the element of employment protection and how it refers to regulations on hiring and training and things like that. We then went on to look at employment protection legislation index by the OECD. And we looked at the Employment Protection Legislation Index and why that's so important in regards to elements of the 18 basic areas that apply in regards to the Employment Protection Legislation Index on the OECD. We looked at the summary indicators of the strictness of employment protection legislation within different countries, such as Australia, Austria, Belgium, and we referred to the diagram which looked at the different countries in regards to them. We then went on to look at analysing the legislative and procedural protection that exists for workers. So the protection that workers have in relation to any sort of protection rights that are implemented, and also looked at how this is governed and what legislation governs this element. We then went on to look at the element of arbitration and how there's 3 forums. So we have the employment tribunals, the common law courts, and the arbitration scheme, which is the ACAS. We then went on to look at trade unions and referred to trade unions in the UK and looked at what a trade union is and looked at Unison. We looked at what trade unions do, things like unis look at things like national pay, improving working conditions, organised workplace representatives who help, employees of the workplace, excuse me, with any sort of issues and things like that. We also looked at how the union looks at things like improving parental leave equality legislation and, looking at what the structure of the union is. So what the union reps do, they negotiate agreements with employers on things like, pay and conditions. They discuss major changes such as redundancies. They discuss members' concerns with employers, and they accompany members to disciplinary and grievance meetings and help members with legal and financial problems too. We then went on to look at employment tribunal and how they're a specialist employment tribunal that deal with disputes in regards to that, things like dismissal, unfair dismissal, discrimination, and which members are at a tribunal. So you'll have a legally qualified chair, 2 lay members, and how their decisions can be appealed to the employment tribunal. We looked at common law courts. We then went to look at ACAS, which is the arbitration scheme, which came into force on the 21st of May 2021. And it was there to provide a faster, non-legalistic and more cost-effective alternative to employment tribunals. We looked at the examples of unfair treatment of employees, so things like based on the protected characteristics, which are age, disability, gender reassignment, marriage, civil partnership, maternity, pregnancy, race, religion or belief, and sex. We also looked at some examples of legal consequences of unfair treatment of an employee for the employer. So if you've you're a job applicant or if you're an employee or a worker, and gave some examples. We also looked at the law relating to the nature of protection for workers in any given situation. So we looked at termination of employment. We looked at wrongful dismissal, the nature of the claim and how this claim could go to the employment tribunal. We looked at the UK Employment Guide, which looks at defences, compensation, damages, and damages to failure for statutory dismissal and disciplinary procedure. We looked at what garden leave was and why it was so important in regards to employment law. We then went on to look at unfair dismissal, the entitlement to claim, constructive dismissal, and potentially fair reasons for dismissal, things like misconduct, poor performance, ill health, things like redundancy, or some other substantial reason justifying any sort of dismissal. We looked at whistleblowing with respect to the Public Interest Disclosure Act 1999 and how that is used in regards to employment law and why that is important. And we looked at the element of whistleblowing in regards to what kind of issues it raises. So this all was in regards to a learning outcome 3, which was to identify the elements of understanding aspects of employment protection given to different types of workforce. So now we're going to go on to learning outcome 4, which is to look at analysing organisational level employment relation processes, functions and procedures. So firstly, we're just going to go into look at what is an employee, because it's really important to identify what an employee is and what the definition of an employee is in regards to identifying elements of what the definition in law is as well. So the employee is someone who has replaced employee relations. So we're looking at the definition of employee relations. So employee relations refers to the relationship between or among an employer and its employees. So a relationship for both the employee and the employers. Depending on the context, the term has both practical and theoretical applications. Certain companies may have a dedicated team for maintaining and improving employee relations, and this term may refer to this team. In other cases, the term may refer to theories, plans, and policies designed to support employees and their interests. Regardless of the approach, employee relations are typically overseen by companies' human resource management. So they deal with everything in regards to it. That's the relationship between both. And it looks at the element of, how the human resource department deal with it. Employee relations concerns the building of positive relationships and interactions among employers and employees, and a broader level helps foster a sense of community within an organization. This could entail initiating transparent workplace communication or supporting the emotional, physical, and psychological health of employees. So it's all about maintaining that relationship between both the employer and the employee. Ultimately, the goal of the employee relations is to create a positive relationship between employers and employees that leads to an increase in employee retention, happiness, and productivity. So if there's a relationship between them, it favors the element of productivity and it tries to perform, the employee will perform better. Although employee relations, staff and policies are typically intended to be non-biased and neutral, staff and policies are both ultimately responsible for protecting the interests and well-being of the company as a whole. Employers should beware employee relations. Staff and policies are not generally intended to protect employer interests. When we look at employee relations, there's been a decline of industrial relations in the UK. The decline of industrial relations can be seen in various ways, but notably in the level of trade union membership and industrial action. From a peak of 12 million plus, union membership has fallen to around 7 million between 1980 and 2000. The coverage of collective agreements contracted from over 3/4 to under a third of employed workforce. So that's quite a big reduction. The Workforce Employment Relations Studies, WERS 2011, showed that union officials spent most of their time supporting individual members with discipline and grievance issues, not on negotiating pay and conditions. So it's a big shift. The shift in the coverage and content of collective bargaining has reflected in a dramatic reduction in industrial action since the 1980s. In 2018, there were 273,000 working days lost due to labour disputes, the sixth lowest annual total since records began in 1891. So that's a huge element of that, a huge part of, there are some examples of employee relations responsibilities, like employees encouraging employee engagement, building community, building activities, making happy employees in a good working environment as well, improving workplace communication, which is a big thing because, in some workplaces, communication is not something that happens regularly, and sometimes company managers and companies don't have much communication with their employees. So companies can make or break a good relationship with an employee over the quality of communication. A good employee relation department will continue to try and improve workplace communication, whether that means establishing policies or encouraging transparent exchanges. Another element of employee relations is like settling disputes and conflicts. The more people are involved in the disagreement, the greater the overall discontent. Addressing sexual harassment and bullying, overseeing any sort of health and safety procedures, so making sure that, it's a safe place for them to work, handling wage concerns, clarifying company policies, again, monitoring overall employee morale, and it is an employee relations department remains important for very simple reasons. Without employees, a company could not function. So companies want to keep experienced, productive, and valuable employees for as long as possible, and effort, often referred to as employee retention. Employees must be happy enough that they will at least remain less likely to leave the organisation. So it's really important in regards to employee relations, and it is, as we say, it's an integral aspect of any company or organisation if they want to have long-term success. So now we're going to look at theories of employment relation. Employment relation theories are frameworks that help explain and predict the outcomes of various employee relations. Scenarios such as conflicts, maybe grievances, maybe motivation, performance, and engagement. So we've got the first one is uterist, and that is a theory that is a perspective of an employment that emphasizes the shared interests of all members of the organization. It assumes that they are compatible goals, a common purpose, and a single, which is unitary interest, which means that if managed effectively, the organization would function harmoniously. From the unitarist perspective, for example, the employment relationship can be understood as a kind of social membership, as a cooperative pursuit of common aims and values on the basis of a technically effective division of labour. So the unitary approach really believes in unity among the workers and the management, and bringing together efforts for teamwork and to achieve a common goal. This theory believes that conflicts arise due to improper organizational management. So that's the whole point of having unitary theory. The next one is the pluralist theory. The pluralist theory of employment relations assumes that an organization is comprised of individuals who form distinct groups with their personal set of objectives and aims. Advocates of the pluralist theory see an organization as a multi-structured institution where there would be continued tension if the power is not decentralized between groups. The pluralist theory recognizes the legal rights of employees to participate and create unions, which will ensure they are valued and respected by the management. The pluralist theory emphasizes mutuality, shared interests, and partnership agreements for individual groups to pursue goals with significant limits to abuse of power. While the pluralist theory recognizes that an organization is composed of multiple interests groups, it directly supports employee involvement. This is because it advocates that every individual view must be taken into account in decision-making processes. Therefore, so this kind of pluralist view wants to get the employees involved. Therefore, this implies that employees are permitted to deliberate on matters that affect the work, which can be in terms of change in operational processes, working condition, and organizational policies. The pluralist theory also leaves a room for organizations to see the bright side of an employee involvement by gaining insights into ideas and opinions of every employee. So we've got the radical theory, and the perspective is categorized by general skepticism over the capacity of HRM to empower workers or eradicate the strains of workplace conflict. Radicals will tend to emphasize the uneven, exploitative, and humanizing nature of relationship between employers and employees. We have the Marxist theory. Marx's approach, according to this approach, industrial conflicts are the central reality of industrial relations, but open conflicts are uncommon. The Marxist approach views industrial disputes as a class struggle and industrial relations as a politicized concept and an element of class struggle. Though the unequal distribution of resources and ownership, the ruling class exploits the working class. So the working class use their labor power to produce what is called a commodity, which is a good or a service produced by human labor and is bought and sold on the market. So, you know, the view of the industrial relations is a product of theory and capitalist society. Marxists actually argue that industrial relation, as I mentioned, is a relation of clashes of class interests between capital and labor. An employer tries to maximize profit by holding surplus value and underpaying works remuneration. So it's the element of, you know, capitalism, to be honest. And then you've got individuals. So this is where contracts, contract law and terms of contract are the heart of any sort of individual employee's contract in regards to the handbook they produce, any sort of elements that should all be contained in the contract. And the contract falls within any sort of key employment legislation falls within the Employment Rights Act 1996. Collective relationships. Sorry, I missed a slide out on 4.1, critically analyze the roles and functions of different stakeholders in managing the employment relationship. So stakeholder management is a critical aspect of human resource that helps organizations effectively communicate, engage, and collaborate with various stakeholders. It involves identifying, understanding, and prioritizing the needs of expectation of stakeholders to achieve their desired outcomes effectively. Effective stakeholder management in human resource management is essential for achieving organizational success, fostering a positive work environment, and fostering any sort of mutual beneficial relationship. So it's really important in regards to stakeholders. Stakeholder management in human resource is crucial for achieving the organizational success, engaging employees, building solid relationship between them, promoting any sort of reputation and driving innovation and continuous improvement. By effective managing stakeholders, human resource can align with human resource initiatives with organizational goals, create positive work environments, and foster mutually beneficial partnerships. So we went through individuals. Now the next one is collective relationships. So these relations are centered around negotiations, collective bargaining and dispute resolution, all in pursuit of fair treatment, improved working conditions, keeping the communication channels open between employers and unions is key to avoiding misunderstandings. It is, like we said, concerned with issues such as rights of individuals, consultation, co-determination, and, it is in regards to collective bargaining as well. So employee relations in the time of COVID. So the COVID pandemic has changed the way we work with many organizations, employees. So it's changed a lot. It's made a lot of changes to the organization and companies. It's shifting to a new way of working. So things like remote working, hybrid working. While these changes have been necessary to ensure business continuity, protect employees and adapt to change employee needs and expectations. The post-COVID has seen a change in amount of type of employee relations issues. According to the latest research from CIPD, the professional body of human resources and people development, over half, which is 53% of employers, agree that the UK is entering a new, more unstable period of employment relations. The findings came from a YouGov survey of 1,075 senior HR professionals in the UK. 42% of respondents cited that they expected employees would face increasing levels of industry action over the 12 months, which was July 2022. However, many HR professionals do not believe they are seeing an increase in employee relation cases within the workforce. For example, Sally Benston, founder of Limelight HR, said that she hadn't seen a perceptible change in the time spent on employment relations issues, and noted that many organizations she works with face the issues head on, so have an avoided expectation escalating into grudges and grievances. The pandemic has no doubt taken a toll on employees' mental health and well-being, with many reporting increased levels of anxiety, stress, and burnout. A report collated by change activation platform Runway showed that employee concerns about issues related to their general well-being had risen by a staggering 88% in the last 12 months, which is huge. And this was in an article on the state of inclusivity in the workplace 2023. So when employees are experiencing these types of issues, they may become less engaged or less productive, leading to a decline in overall performance. Additionally, employees who are experiencing high levels of stress and burnout may be more likely to experience conflicts with their co-workers. This can lead to kind of a breakdown in communication, reducing collaboration, and an overall negative environment. So, the issue of COVID has had a huge impact on society as a whole, with the management of remote hybrid working. For many organizations, remote or hybrid working has become a permanent part of their workforce strategy. While remote working can no doubt offer many benefits, such as increased autonomy and flexibility for employers, it can also present unique employee relationship challenges. The ONS data showed that in February 2022, more than 3/4, which is 78% of those who worked from home in some capacity, said that being able to work from home gave them improved work-life balance. So, the issue, some feel isolated and lack of communication, disconnection, but some feel like it's an element of their performance where, it's become a permanent part of their life, and they're able to, have an increased amount of autonomy. Managing employee relationships and conflicts, workplace conflicts. So workplace conflicts, though fairly common, it is an uncomfortable situation that quickly escalates to a major problem if left unaddressed. So it can result in increased workplace stress, decreased job satisfaction, higher rates of absentees, low productivity, and poor morale and quality of work. So there are, workplace, conflicts can cause a lot of issues with the element of, the manager needs to kind of monitor team relationships so that they are aware of any sort of simmering tensions between people. So, they need to be on top of things, and how to handle them, they need to be able to handle them, and be able to encourage open and honest communication with them. So they establish the element of, in every organization, you've got to bear in mind the dynamics of employee relations and conflict resolution plays a pivotal role in shaping the overall work environment and determining the success of the business. Employees are the backbone of the organization and are fostering positive relationships. So ultimately, they need to highlight any sort of effective, try to highlight any sort of workplace conflict and try to resolve it. If there may be something like, communication breakdown, it might be differences in different work styles and preferences, it might be personality clashes, performance issues, the effective communication lies at the heart of any sort of conflict resolution. So, you should facilitate understanding, promote open dialogue, get to the root of the cause, and, be an active listener, mediate, negotiate, try to build this positive culture in your organization and address if there's any sort of issues of workplace bullying and things like that, because you need to be, addressing these issues. Managing employee relations is, like we said, a fundamental part of any organization. Effective communication promotes this positive culture, and workplace moves away from any sort of bullying that is occurring. So, try to, make sure that there is workplace, employers are trained, employers are, you as a manager is not only addressing challenges, but also, trying to understand and cooperate. So addressing any sort of issues around conflict resolution, you need to be a manager that is able to be more motivated to and speak to their employees and resolve any sort of disputes. Employee relations skills set. So this skill set includes active listening, empathy negotiation, and the ability to convey complex information in an understandable manner. Mastery in conflict resolution is also essential as it enables employee relations specialists to mediate disputes and foster a harmonious workplace. Employee relations refers to an organization's effort to maintain a positive relation with employees. The goal of the good employee relations include inspiring employee loyalty, and also, increasing engagement, reducing turnover, and creating a positive culture. This positive culture is the main role around it. And employers need to manage their organization, but make sure they have a focus on, listening as well, and negotiating skills, and, being able to empathize, persuade, and negotiate with the employer. So you'll be able to manage any sort of employee relations skill sets. The relationship between stakeholders and organizations. So, when we look at the relationship, a stakeholder has vested an interest in a company and can affect or be affected by its operation and performance. Stakeholders may include investors, employees, customers, suppliers, communities, governments, and trade unions. An entity stakeholder may be internal or external. Companies need to ensure they build a collaborative relationship between organizations and stakeholders. This can be accomplished through stakeholder engagement, which is the building of two-way relationship between organizations and stakeholders. And it's really important that they maintain positive stakeholder relationships, which helps groups work together more effectively and enables more holistic decision making. If you get the stakeholder engagement process right, then your stakeholders might become champions of your project. So it's really important, and they are important to any organization as well, because they empower people, because they become involved in the decision making process. So they are really involved. So these are some of the elements of an ethical approach, and would normally incorporate a range of stakeholders, accounts of which groups and individuals may be considered to be stakeholders. So this is in the Constitution. You've got A, B, C, D, E. So you've got constitutes on who behalf of the organisation exist and operate. So that's business owners or voluntary associations, employees who conduct the organisation's affairs, customers who receive the goods or services, suppliers, and the government. 4.2, assess the impact of external context and organizational level employment relations processes on organizations' organizational performance. At an individual level, according to a survey was done by Watson Wyatt's 2007, 946 companies across 22 countries, highly engaged employees are twice as likely to performers than other employees. The primary reason behind the finding is that they work harder and are more loyal, and hence go extra mile to fulfill organizational goals. At an organizational level, a meta-analysis of 7,939 business units of 36 companies by Mr. Harter and his colleagues yielded a direct relationship between employee engagement, productivity, and profit. So, it's really important that, the element of communication is really important in any sort of organizational performance. Employees' relations are key to the success of engagement initiatives or performance. Good relationship with peers and leaders impact positively on employee performance. Therefore, employee relations imply the creation of working environment that motivates towards the goals of the organization. According to the study, the factors that influence the performance in organization are external factors: working conditions, organizational culture, organizational assets, HR management, organizational structure, political, economic, and technological, as well as leadership. Organizations today are increasingly exposed to the challenges of managing employee relations and adopt practices that promote positive working culture. So it's all about employee relationships, having this culture where everyone is involved, a positive culture, because that gets employees more involved, but also, gets the fact that employee processes become better and employees work more and it's more productive. The style of management has been replaced by encouraging approach that involves increased participation of the workforce in the decision-making process. Employee empowerment strategies and a perceptive leadership approach are increasingly finding their acceptance with organizations, since it promotes organizational efficiency in terms of productivity and performance. Another one is flexible organizational structures that are disguised by reduced layers of hierarchy, are much more favored for their role in improving existing work culture and employee commitment levels. Empowerment strategies. An employee empowerment strategy is a set of managerial initiatives designed to give more power and responsibility to employees in their work. This could include input into new or improved processes and systems. Empowerment can be developed by being respectful and non-judgmental, building a relationship where the person feels comfortable to discuss their feelings and what they want, focusing on strengths and abilities. Potterfield, 1999, states that empowerment strategies can be effective only when the organization provides the following 4 essential ingredients to its staff. That includes information about the organization's performance, rewards based on organization's performance, knowledge that enables the workforce to contribute to organization's performance, and power to make decisions that influence organization performance. Bargaining with trade unions. So bargaining is when an employer and a union agree to negotiate on pay, terms and conditions, and this agreement is called recognition of the union. The negotiations are collective bargaining. Collective bargaining is the negotiation process between employer and the union, and the goal of negotiating to reach a written collective agreement which becomes a contract that sets out the terms and conditions of their employment. And then organizations are run by various disciplinary standards and framework that guide the employer in regards to, their behavior that they need to have whilst in the workplace. So it could be, that the fact that they need to behave properly around certain machinery, they need to avoid bullying, things like that. And this, enables them to follow the procedures and standards that are in place. Employees' code of conduct and performance levels. Employees must carry out their duties at a level of performance acceptable to council. Employees must cooperate with reasonable requests. And, they need to follow a code of conduct, and which is a set of guidelines that outlines, like we mentioned, the specific behaviours and actions that are expected of employees within a particular organisation. This code typically covers issues such as workplace behaviour. It could be the dress code. It could be regarding any sort of policies in place regarding conflict of interest and confidentiality and the use of company resources. A code of conduct, as we said, is employees must follow and employers must follow in the workplace. Often a company will use its things like its core values, including its mission, to guide the creation of these codes, and these are guidelines on how employees would interact with one another and the employees as well. So it relates both to employers and employees. Organizational conflicts. Organizational conflict, also known as workplace conflict, can be defined as the state of a disagreement or misunderstanding that arises between individuals or groups who work for the same organization as a direct result of competing requirements, concepts, convictions, values, or objectives. There are numerous instances when organizational conflicts can create problems with the effectiveness of operation. However, it must be understood that conflicts are an inevitable part of the business environment, and organizations adopt different strategies to resolve conflict, as we mentioned earlier. According to the conventional way of doing business, conflicts were viewed as a negative and threatening action working against the organizational interests. Competitive work environment. So individuals in a competitive work environment are motivated to work more efficiently and effectively. The desire to outperform others or achieve set goals can lead to a higher level of productivity as employers strive to exceed benchmarks. A competitive environment is the dynamic external system in which businesses competes and functions. The more sellers of a similar product or service, the more competitive the environment in which they compete. An example for you is look at fast food restaurants. There's so many to choose from and the competition is so high. So the next slide is managing conflicts and implementing change. And we've looked a little bit at this earlier as well, but any sort of misunderstanding in an organization can lead to confusion, frustration, mistrust, or resentment. To prevent any sort of misunderstanding, you need to clarify the scope, objectives, and the impact of change. provide clear and consistent information. And, communication is the big part of it. To perform at high levels, they need to communicate, managers need to communicate. You need to understand the sources of the resistance, communication, involve the team. It's so important that you involve the team, and give feedback and monitor the measure and progress and outcomes of things as well. So, it's really important communication in regards to that. Employment management strategies. So when any business has clear goals and plans for its employees and define a management style, there'll be employee have different management style. Managers need to provide regular feedback and support candidates through internal movements as well. There are numerous employee management strategies that can be implemented by any sort of organisation to ensure any sort of increased performance level and adherence to quality standards. The managers should be provided with adequate guidelines in regards to the assessment, documentation, how they want it to run, and what they need to follow. Improved communication. This is really important in any organisation, be it a large organisation or any sort of small organisation. Improved communication can help motivate, any sort of organisation. It can, help, them communicate with each other, and it's a two-way process. Communication is so important in a workplace, having effective communication. It boosts employee morale. There's engagement, productivity, and satisfaction between the employees. Communication is also key for better team collaboration. Ultimately, effective workplace communication helps drive better results for individuals, teams, and organizations. Building communication skills have a profound long-term and short-term benefits for organization. An effective communicator is able to motivate their team. So an effective manager, is able to motivate their team so they get more done and have fewer misunderstandings. So it's really important in any organization. The next one is 4.3, which is to evaluate the significance, impact of the integration of employment relations, processes on organizational policy, practice, and organizational outcomes. So importance of employee relations. Employee relations describes the relationship between employers and employees, both concerning the relationship between employers and individual employees and concerning collective relationships. Individual voice channels are very important, but collective channels, the use of union or non-representatives, give employees a collective voice that can complement and reinforce the individual's element of challenges. Employee relations focuses on both individual and collective. So a positive climate of employee relations with high levels of employee involvement, commitment, and engagement can improve business outcomes and contribute to employers' issues in regard to employers' well-being. So that needs to be taken into account when you look at elements of that. Retaining loyal employees. So employees remain loyal to employers where they have been appreciated and feel comfortable. So if your employee, for example, if you work in an organization and your manager appreciates the work you do and also gives you a little bit of leeway and helps you, supports you, you will appreciate that manager, and you will work to build this positive relationship between you. So it's really important you retain loyal employees. Increase productivity. As we discussed above, the company that has a strong relationship with the employer is more productive, as we've stated. When an employer for you, they are devoting their full effort, they're doing the work for you. Reduce conflict, workplace conflict. It has been seen in the study that when an employee enjoys working around the employer, they are less likely to create conflict. It can be said that a positive employer and employee relation creates a peaceful working environment. And I totally agree with that. It's so true that when you have a positive, working environment, they will reduce the element of the fact that, it will increase productivity. It will, make employers more happy where they are, and there won't be no workplace conflict. It will reduce the element of workplace conflict. You'll be able to listen. If you listen to your employees, you're able to identify that you are working well with them. You are trying to resolve issues. So if you move away from that, then it's quite difficult to work in that kind of environment. Antecedents to employee engagement. However, management behavior, compensation, employee rights, leadership, and promotion have positive effect on employee engagement. Therefore, the management behavior, compensation, employees' right, leadership, and promotion are the accidents of an employee's engagement. HRM policies and practices used to elicit employee engagement can be applied to the individual employee, to employees as a collective group, or as sometimes argued, to both. A useful model here is the voice model, VOICE is VOICE framework outlined at Story as a means of addressing factors that might lead to appropriate employee engagement. So the voice model, the vision is the use of good leadership techniques which give the organizational unit a clear sense of the future that engages hearts and minds and creates pride among employees. The OTHE is the opportunity. The work of an offer provides a chance to grow both personally and professionally through participation in the organization's activities. I incentive is the compensation package is fair and equitable, including base salary, bonus, and other financial incentives. Impact, the work itself makes a difference or creates meaning, particularly as it connects the employee with the customer who uses the employee's work. Then we've got C, which is the community. So the social environment includes being part of the team when appropriate and working with co-workers who care. This can be considered in relation to employee participation and involvement, as well as strategic management of the employment relationship. And then C is communication, which is the flow of information. It's a two-way, so employees know about what is going on. Communication, as we mentioned earlier, is a vital part or element of any sort of engagement in employee relationships, because it's the element of the relationship between the employee, and it's also the key part of any organization. If you have good communication, you will have good productivity. There will be less conflict interest. There will be a good relationship between the managers and the employers. So good communication is a huge part of any organization or business. Employment relations and engagement, so collaborative approach. Employee relations is dedicated to enhancing the quality of work environment and maximizing employee engagement, as we mentioned earlier as well, and productivity while promoting confidential, equitable, fair, timely, and effective consultation and support. The main purpose of employee relation, as we mentioned, is to foster and improve a positive relation between employees and employers. This is intended to increase employee retention and productivity for the company and to encourage a sense of community. Pearson 2010 said that what we turn employee engagement into another short-lived fad is if it is used by employees as a method to get people to work harder. It has been reported that there's some hesitation in trade union quarters to the engagement agenda, since the emphasis on discretionary behaviour can be seen as merely working harder or giving more effort in unpaid overtime, for example. And it is true that in some cases of poor implementation of high performance working, there have been incidents of increased stress and the intensification of work. If some managers take the view that employee engagement is about getting employees to work harder, union reluctance will be well-founded, but the overwhelming evidence is of mutual gains. There's also evidence that some managers think that employee engagement is just about listening to their employees via an engagement attitude survey as a form of two-way communication. This will kill off the interest in employee engagement quickly, as employees realize it's a sham form of communication. Employee engagement is more than that. is about building trust, involvement, and a sense of purpose and identity where employees' contribution to business success is seen as essential. And Pearson is right in what he says, because it's so important to have this relationship and to identify the elements of employer engagement and for it not to be fake. Two aspects of Pearson quote about worth noting is, firstly, it highlights the concept of trust and voice in building an engaged workforce. There are important facets of engagement. Their relationship with engagement are explored in more depth. And second, the focus of the quote is largely on the impact of engagement at level of the individual. Indeed, much of the literature on engagement focuses on the construct at the level of the individual. Comparing engagement and burnout. So another conceptualization of engagement includes the psychological components of dedication, absorption, and vigor. Burnout, however, is reaction to chronic job stress and is categorized by exhaustion and disengagement and a reduced sense of personal accomplishment. A study done at the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence found out that there are people who experience both high engagement and high burnout at the same time. In fact, 18.8% of the workers involved in the study fit this category. They saw both positive and negative impacts, but ultimately intended to quit their jobs. So the positive engagement, energy, involvement, efficiency, negative burnout, exhaustion, cynicism, ineffectiveness. So elements, there are studies out there to identify that as well. So the HRM roles and associated displays in expectations. So the role and expectations display requirement. And this diagram actually suggests that emotional labour is embedded into the workplace by O'Brien and Linhan in 2014. That practitioners, as they most emotionally manage others and themselves, particularly in difficult, challenging contexts such as explored. O'Brien found the emotional labour in HRM work was related to 4 roles the HRM practitioners need to play: cheerleader, champion, honest broker, and rule enforcer, together with professional elements of it. So we've finished learning outcome 4 now. So the next learning outcome we're going to do is, the next session we're going to do is the assignment discussion session. So we've done learning outcome 1, 2, 3, and 4. And the next session is assignment discussion session. These are some of the references that you could use for your assignment discussion or just to further reading around the area. They're all available on Moodle for you, and ebooks are available on Moodle and any sort of additional reading. There's some links there that you can go on to look at any sort of fundamental relationships of employees and management, and also look at trade unions and the element of the different strategies of employment theories as well. Thank you for attending today's session, and the next session is on assignment discussion. Thank you.